Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. Most recently I have finished reading the Carreta by B. Traven, and before that I finished Government, also by B. Traven. Let me just read you a little bit about the books. They are part of the Jungle Cycle or Mahogany Cycle, and I'll give you the biographical note that was printed with these Ivan R.D. volumes as well. For 35 years, from 1876 to 1911, power in Mexico was in the hands of one man, Porfirio Diaz. Mexico's constitution had been altered to sanction his re-elections, which were assured by his appointment of state governors and other officials. Opposition was controlled by a ruthless federal police called the Rurales. It was a reign of peace and prosperity for the few and dire poverty for the many. Half the entire rural population of Mexico was bound to debt slavery. Big landowners and foreign capital were favored as more and more Indians lost their communal lands. In the final decade of Diaz's rule, however, opposition strengthened, and before his last engineered re-election, he promised a return to democratic forms, which, after the election, he gave no signs of honoring. In 1910, revolution broke out. Independent rebel armies under the leadership of Pancho Villa, Emiliano Zapata, Francisco Madero, and others upset the power of the landlords and eventually overthrew the Diaz regime. In what have become known as the Jungle novels, B. Traven wrote during the 1930s an epic of the birth of the Mexican Revolution. The 6 novels, Government, the Carreta, March to the Montería, Trozas, The Rebellion of the Hanged, and The General from the Jungle, describe the conditions of peonage and debt slavery under which the Indians suffered in Diaz's time. The novels follow the spirit of rebellion that slowly spread through the labor camps and haciendas, culminating in the bloody revolt that ended Porfirio Diaz's rule. In the 1920s, when B. Traven arrived in the country, peonage, although officially abolished by the new Constitution of 1917, was still a general practice in many parts of Mexico. The author observed the system firsthand in Chiapas, the southernmost province, a mountainous and heavily forested region where the Jungle novels, as well as many other of his stories, are set. The mysterious B. Traven, 1890 to 1969, was born in Chicago, spent his youth in Germany as an itinerant actor and revolutionary journalist, became a seaman on tramp steamers, settled in Mexico in the early 1920s, and began recording his experiences in novels and stories. Ivan R.D. is republishing 8 novels and books of short stories by B. Traven, and is publishing the first translation into English of Trozas, the 4th of the Jungle novels. So Traven is a figure of mystery. A lot of folks don't believe his own allegation that he was born a U.S. citizen. I don't know if any more information has come to light since when I first discovered Traven, but I have always taken him at his word when he said that he was an American. The novel of his, The Death Ship, that I read last year, appears to be based upon some sort of personal experience, and it involves a man who loses all of his identification. One wonders if such a thing happened to him. We at least know that he did seem to have spent time in Europe, and I don't know the circumstances of why he wasn't getting his works published here. I think he made the attempt and wasn't able to do so, so he got them published in Germany. There is dispute as to whether the books were written in German and then translated to English, or written in English and then translated to German. I think he alleged that they were written in English first, but as this note informs you, at least one book was translated into English from the German. So it's a mystery with no clear resolution at this time. One would hope with hive mind and the advent of all sorts of pieces of information online that can be pieced together by multitudinous hands, that something more will become known. I've always taken him at his word, but who knows what sort of an American he was. I would not be surprised if he were Mexican American. But that said, it is indubitable that the novels he wrote certainly bear the earmarks of having been written by an American hand. And the description that I read of the jungle cycle or the mahogany cycle, I think, gives you a very good idea. I began the year with government, and it's 229 pages, and it follows a functionary in a small village, and as he beseeches his friend, the governor or something, for a job, and he takes the job, and then the purpose of having a government position is to figure out ways to wring other money out of the job for one's self beyond the meager salary, which is nominal at best. Under the dictator, as Traven mentioned in here, you've got a ladder, and it is not only the man at the top that is a dictator. So if you have a dictator at the top, every rung holds its own dictator, and so every one of them is trying to get his profit as he can from the situation, official capacity as such, or on the sly. But it was a very compelling read, and I thought it was very good. And then I read the second volume in the set, and this is beyond good. I think the word I used was astonishing. I'm not going to reveal the plot details at all. I would recommend, if you decide to read this set, that you start with government and then move into the Carreta. And I would also suggest, if you get, say, these editions or whichever, in this case, that you do not read the matter on the back. I did, and it doesn't impact your reading of the novel at all. I think, I suspect that the 6 volumes comprise or form an American masterpiece. I would not hesitate, I think, to say the American masterpiece. So little details leaked out that did not perturb my reading of the book at all. A good work will not be spoiled by spoilers, but even so, I would have been glad not to have known that little bit of information beforehand. That said, each novel can be read independently as a standalone. You do not need any foreknowledge. Although in the second book, I have to say that there does come a point when you may well feel a spark of glee just because of a reference that takes you back to the first one. But they are not at all dependent. However, I suspect that cumulatively they are going to build. And so I am partaking of them in order, in the proper sequence. And it's not the kind of read that you hesitate with or you feel like slowing down on. It's an easy read. He has a very clear style. So, highly recommended. And then the second book that I had finished was this book by Chang, Early Chinese Civilization, which is a set of essays. And I'll just read a little bit. Let's see. I very much enjoyed that he talked about his biography a little bit as a student. I was born in Peking in 1931, the year the Japanese invaded Manchuria, and in Peking I lived and studied until the end of 1946. This bit of personal history is relevant in two ways. First, I was brought up at the time of China's major cultural transformations, when the Chinese classics nonetheless still retained a degree of prestige and substance in the modernized schools. Second, the Japanese knew very well the value of the classical Confucian code of behavior to those in the role of ruler. And during 1937 to 1945, the Chinese classics were quite actively promoted in the schools of occupied Peking. For these reasons, I received as a child a rudimentary but significant education in traditional Chinese scholarship. So that's just a little bit of personal anecdote. He elaborates on that and upon the type of education that he received. And in fact, he then goes on, after he describes his own experience, he says, in the United States, the pedagogical tradition is, of course, entirely different, and no students of ancient China can count on any contact with Chinese scholarship out of and prior to the college and postgraduate contexts. But the department structure based on the traditional disciplines is identical. The difficulty is compounded greatly by the tight squeeze experienced by today's graduate students between the lengthy education imperative to acquire the basic research tools, some of which a Chinese student would bring to the graduate school, on the one hand, and the financial desirability or necessity for a short graduate career on the other. A competent and productive career in ancient Chinese studies is, in this country at this time, only for the extremely gifted or the very rich. Motivation and hard work alone are no longer always sufficient. That seems like a common tale in the American system. And the essays were of varying degrees of difficulty to get through. Let me just go to the table of contents. The beginnings of agriculture in the Far East, China toward urban life, urbanism and the king in ancient China, towns and cities in ancient China. Those were all pretty good reads. At one point, he mentions the explosive growth of agriculture, I think with the Chang, and says that it cannot be accounted for by any sort of technological innovations or improvements. And so the only way to account for it was by the impressment of unfree labor. And that caused the explosion of substantial agricultural growth. And then he talked about the lineage system, and those were really hard for me to follow. And then into talking about food and myths, and they were also harder to follow. I'm interested in the explosive growth of agriculture as it happened, and I am making this part of a project. I am reading other books by him and edited by him and translated by him. So this is how my year is beginning, and I am reading, of course, Traven. I will embark on the third in the Mahogany Saga tomorrow, and I have to say I've also been reading Francis Parkman, The History of the French and English in North America, and so these are actually serving as very nice complements. Both are dealing very much with Indians, and that is the phrase used in both. And you see the beginnings of the white intrusion upon the continent, and here you see the results much later down the line. So at the rate it's going, I'm probably going to finish the books by Traven well before I do this. This I'm counting on to be almost a full year read. It's one of 2 volumes. But at least for now, the echoes that come across from one to the other are very good. In this, you get entirely the white explorer perspective, the white colonizer perspective, the white businessman perspective, the white conqueror perspective. And here, Traven focuses not exclusively, but primarily upon the peon, the person who has no rights and has been, by his or her situation, reduced to debt peonage. And he does not shy away from describing any aspect of the exploitative system under which these people lived. And so it's very enlightening. We are used to reading things, of course, in historical account from the standpoint of the victor, so to speak. I think art and the novel allows a little bit more leeway, perhaps. I hope to supplement my reading of Parkman with more history in the future written from a Native American viewpoint. And I already last year did a little bit of that. But these novels by Traven, especially if you have spent any time in Mexico, are really putting the meat on the bones, so to speak, of the nature of colonial exploitation. And so it is very worthwhile. I think, as I say, it is an American masterpiece, probably the American masterpiece in novel form. The 6 of them really deserve to be compiled in a Library of America edition. I approached them years ago when I had read my first of his novels, The White Rose, and suggested they do, and they declined. They trembled a little bit at the thought, and expressed that they adhere to the theory that, in spite of what he claimed, he was not an American writer, that he was a European. I don't know. I kind of suspect that there may well be other reasons that people have wanted to disassociate Traven from the American continent. I think one of those, obviously, because his insight is incisive. He doesn't seem to miss a thing, and it may well have made persons in positions of power and authority uncomfortable. So that is how the reading goes. I will touch in with the next 3 books that I finish. I would not be surprised if it will be not only this, but further volumes in the Mahogany sequence, because I am now reading Chang's textbook of Chinese archaeology, and it's slow going. But as I say, these novels, you sort of breeze through them, aside from having to just pause a moment after every chapter or 2, just to let everything soak in a bit. The Carreta particularly, it was just beyond anything I've ever read. You follow the course of one character in his life as he is a ox cart driver, I think is how they refer to it. He drives an oxen-pulled wagon, transporting goods across these miserable roads. And there again, if you've ever traveled to the backwoods areas of Mexico, you know the kind of roads I'm talking about. It can take a long time to cover a very short span of distance, but it recalls to my mind I think it was the second book that I read a couple of years ago by Mulkraj Anand, Cooley. And I think the character in that book starts out the book as a oxen caretaker or something of that sort, and then he moves on to different adventures. And it's a case of the protagonist moves into successive positions of employment, and he describes those work situations in intimate detail. But where I think Traven possibly has the advantage over Mulkraj Anand is that he also brings economic theory to the game. And so I don't think I need to say any more to spoil it for you. Again, if you think that you would like to read the Mahogany sequence or the Jungle sequence, I would encourage you to read them in the proper order. I will put the list in the description box below so that you can check that out. But from what I have seen, his individual novels are very good. At any rate, even the ones in the Mahogany Cycle, each of them, I believe, can stand alone, but I think you will get a greater oomph if you go for the whole set. I would say try the first 2, and if it moves you, then continue on with it. At least that is what I intend to do. I can't vouch for the whole series as yet, but I can vouch for all of the 4 novels by Traven that I have read. They have been among the best novels I have read. I would say they have to be the best American novels that I can recall having read. And again, I say American, loosely defined however you like. Yeah, I can't think of anything that can hold a candle to these. So I will leave that there and touch bases next time I have finished 3 or 4 novels, or when for some reason unknown I just feel like yammering on a little bit. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel. Hello and welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. This is a recent reads video in which I discuss the books that I have most recently finished reading. Since this channel has been operated as a booktube channel, I have made a recent reads video for every 3 or 4 books that I have finished. This is my first one for the year 2025, and I have 3 here. Hi, baby. Got no place for you here, dear. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak.